Here's a strong human-centered introduction for your YouTube story. I've crafted it with suspense, emotional tension, and cliffhanger elements while keeping the wording natural and engaging. Note: 1000 word seems like a typo. I've assumed you want a 1000-word introduction, which is more realistic for a YouTube video intro. I never thought a simple family visit could turn into the most stressful day of my life. I had my 2 kids with me, laughing and carrying their little backpacks, excited to see their cousins. I knocked on the door of the house I grew up in, expecting the familiar warmth of family, maybe even a hug from my brother. Instead, what I got made my heart stop. My brother's face was red with anger, his eyes blazing like fire. "Get out with your kids. This is family only," he shouted. I froze. For a moment, I didn't even know how to react. My kids looked up at me with confusion, clutching my hands, their little hearts racing. I had no idea what had provoked him, no idea this day would turn into a battle I never saw coming. I tried to reason with him, my voice trembling but firm. "What do you mean, family only? We are family." But he wouldn't listen. He waved me and my children away as if we were strangers trespassing on someone else's property. The words hit me harder than any insult ever could. Family was supposed to be a place of love, trust, and belonging. How could it suddenly feel like a war zone? My mind was spinning with questions, fear, and a deep sadness I hadn't expected. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door, thinking about the years of memories we had shared in that house. Birthdays, holidays, laughter echoing through the walls. Was it all just a lie? My brother, once my closest friend, was now acting like I was an intruder. My heart pounded, and my children tugged at my sleeves, their innocent faces asking silent questions I couldn't answer. I had to do something, but I didn't yet know what. Then, amidst the chaos, I remembered something that had been tucked away for years. Something that could change everything. A small, folded piece of paper in my bag, the deed to the house. My hands shook as I reached for it. Could this really be the moment to reveal it? The proof that this home belonged to me as much as to anyone else in the family? I looked at my brother, whose anger hadn't faded even a little, and felt a strange mix of fear and determination. "Wait," I said, trying to calm both him and myself. "I think you need to see this." I pulled the deed out slowly, holding it between my fingers like it was a fragile weapon. His eyes narrowed, suspicion and disbelief flashing across his face. "What's that?" he demanded, stepping closer, his voice tight with tension. My kids huddled behind me, sensing the storm but not fully understanding the danger. As I handed him the paper, I could see the shift in the air. The laughter and chaos of my children's playtime were replaced by an eerie silence. My brother's hands trembled slightly as he took the deed, and for a brief moment I thought maybe, just maybe, he would understand. But then, his expression darkened again, and I realized this wasn't going to be simple. This wasn't just a family dispute, it was a test of trust, power, and what it really meant to belong. I remembered the long nights I had spent thinking about what I would do if this moment ever came. Could I stay calm? Could I stand my ground without turning into the person I didn't want to be? My kids, too young to understand the full story, were already scared, clinging to my legs. I had to be strong not just for myself but for them. Every word I said now could change everything. My brother looked at the deed, then back at me. His lips pressed into a thin line, his jaw tight. I could see the internal battle raging behind his eyes. Anger, pride, maybe even guilt, but also confusion. He had always thought this house was his alone, a symbol of his control over the family. And here I was, standing in front of him, proof in hand that the truth was far more complicated. "Where did you get this?" he asked finally, his voice quieter now but still laced with tension. I met his gaze evenly, refusing to back down. "I've had it for years. I never wanted to fight, but it looks like I have no choice." My heart was racing, my mind buzzing with what might come next. Would he accept it? Or would this be the beginning of a family battle that could last for years? I could feel the weight of every memory, every shared holiday, every argument and reconciliation we had ever had pressing down on me. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about respect, fairness, and whether blood ties truly meant anything when tested. My kids were watching me, and in that moment, I realized that the outcome of this confrontation would shape their understanding of family for the rest of their lives. He looked at the paper again, his hands shaking now, his eyes flicking to my children. "You can't just," he started, then paused. Something was stopping him from finishing the sentence. Was it the truth? Was it fear? Or something else? I didn't know, and that uncertainty made the room feel like it was closing in on us. The tension was unbearable. I wanted to speak, to explain everything, to make him see reason. But I also knew that once I said another word, The moment could explode in ways I couldn't control. I had to choose carefully. Every second that passed felt like an eternity, every glance between us loaded with silent accusations and unsaid words. Then I noticed something subtle, a shift in the way he held himself, the way his gaze softened ever so slightly as he looked at the deed. I could feel the storm inside him slowing down just a little. But just as quickly, a flicker of defiance returned. This was far from over. I knew the real conversation, the real confrontation was just beginning. I took a deep breath, holding my children close, and realized something important. No matter what happened next, I was ready. I had the truth, I had my kids, and I had the courage to face whatever came. But in that moment, standing at the edge of a family feud that threatened to tear us apart, I couldn't shake the feeling that the next few minutes would change everything forever. And that's when my brother spoke again, the words cutting sharper than any anger I had ever felt. "You think a piece of paper changes anything?" I froze. My heart stopped. Because deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. If you want, I can expand this into a full 1,000 plus word version specifically timed for a 10 to 12 minute YouTube video, with extra suspense beats, dialogue, and kid interactions to keep viewers glued until the next part. Do you want me to do that? Absolutely. Here's the continuation, building on your introduction with background, context, character depth, and suspense while keeping the tone natural and human-centered. I could feel my brother's words hanging in the air, heavy and sharp, as if they had weight that could crush everything in the room. "You think a piece of paper changes anything?" he repeated, his voice almost a whisper now, but it carried the same fire. My children clung tighter to me, sensing the tension, their small faces anxious and confused. I didn't have time to calm them, not yet. I had to understand what had pushed my brother to this point, why a home that should have been a place of warmth and memories had suddenly become a battlefield. The truth is, our family had never been simple. Even growing up, there were unspoken rules and invisible lines that no one crossed. My brother had always been the one to enforce them, the one who made sure everyone knew who was in charge, who belonged, and who didn't. As kids, I had followed his lead because I wanted peace, because I didn't want the tension that seemed to follow him wherever he went. But now, standing at the threshold of that same house, I realized that the patterns of our childhood had followed us into adulthood, and somehow I had to break them. I remembered the first time I truly questioned him. It was a long time ago when we were teenagers. Our parents had left town for a week, trusting him to keep the house in order. At first, he acted responsible, but then something changed. He started making rules that weren't really rules, punishing anyone who disagreed, taking control in ways that felt unfair even then. I had tried to speak up, to say what I thought, but he had a way of shutting me down without raising his voice. That fear I felt as a teenager now came rushing back, but it was different. It was tempered with determination. I wasn't a child anymore. I had my own family, my own children, and I couldn't let fear decide the outcome this time. The deed in my hands suddenly felt heavier. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a symbol of years of struggle, sacrifice, and my right to be heard. My brother glanced at it again, his brow furrowed as if trying to decipher some hidden meaning. I wanted to explain everything. The legal steps I had taken, the family lawyer who had helped me, the reasons I had kept this hidden for so long, but I knew that any explanation might be met with anger or disbelief. Sometimes words weren't enough with him. My mind drifted to our parents. They had left things unclear in their wills, leaving a gap that only caused arguments. My brother had always assumed he would inherit the house, the legacy, the control. But my parents had quietly given me my own share, through the deed I now held. It was something I had discovered by accident, something that no one else in the family knew about. And now, revealing it was like lighting a match in a room full of dry kindling. The silence stretched longer than I expected. My brother's gaze shifted from the deed to my children, then back to me. I could see his struggle, anger mixing with confusion, pride wrestling with doubt. I realized that the fight wasn't just about the house. It was about power, about who had the right to control family narratives, about unresolved tensions that had built up for years. And it was about trust. Could he trust me to be fair, to respect what we both had a right to? Could I trust him to see the truth without letting anger cloud his judgment? I remembered the small moments that had shaped our relationship over the years. The nights we had stayed up talking about dreams and fears, the arguments that sometimes ended in laughter, the moments of quiet solidarity when life got too hard. Those memories made this moment even more complicated. This wasn't just a house, it was the center of a lifetime of emotions, the backdrop for every victory and failure we had shared as siblings. I had to tread carefully because once I crossed the line, there was no going back. My brother finally spoke, his voice tight but softer this time. "Why now?" Why bring this up after all these years? He asked. I looked at him, searching for the right words. Because I can't ignore it anymore, I said. Because my children deserve to know where they belong. Because I deserve to stand here without fear. This house isn't just about you. It's about all of us. His expression flickered. For a brief second, I saw the boy I used to know, the brother I had grown up with, the one who laughed and teased and shared secrets and whispers at night. But the moment was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by tension once again. He stepped back, almost as if trying to gain distance from the reality he hadn't anticipated. You think showing me this changes anything? He said, his tone softer but still edged with frustration. You think it makes everything fair? I swallowed hard, my heart racing. I don't know if it makes everything fair, I admitted, but it makes the truth clear. And the truth is something we can't ignore anymore. My children looked up at me, their eyes wide, silently urging me to be brave. I realized then that this was bigger than just a family dispute. It was a lesson in standing up for yourself, in protecting those you love, and in facing uncomfortable truths even when it hurts. The tension in the room was palpable. My brother's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his jaw tight. I could see the storm inside him, the battle between anger, pride, and the faintest glimmer of understanding. Every second felt stretched, every glance loaded with unspoken words. I wanted to say more, to explain everything that had led us here, but I knew the moment wasn't right. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. I thought about what could come next. Could we find a way to work through this? Could we reach a point where my children could feel safe and loved in the house where I had grown up? Or would this confrontation mark the beginning of a permanent rift? The questions swirled in my mind, unanswered and pressing, like shadows creeping across the walls. And then, as if to remind me that nothing was simple, my brother's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his eyes flicking back to the deed and then to me. I couldn't see the screen, but I could feel the shift in his demeanor. Something was coming. Something I didn't understand yet, something that would either escalate the situation or force us to face truths we had avoided for years. My children shuffled nervously, sensing the tension without knowing the details. I knelt down to their level, giving them a reassuring hug, whispering that everything would be okay. But even as I said the words, I wasn't entirely sure. Because deep down, I knew this day was only the beginning. The deed had opened a door, and once it was open, there was no closing it. Every secret, every resentment, every unspoken argument was now at risk of surfacing. I stood there, holding my children close, staring at my brother, wondering what he would do next. Would he accept the truth quietly, retreating into silence and anger, or would this confrontation ignite a family feud that could last for years? I didn't know. But I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. Absolutely. Here's the next part of your story, focusing on deepening the main conflict, adding subplots, and building suspense while keeping it human-centered and natural. The house was quiet now, but it wasn't peaceful. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle from the curtains, felt like it carried a warning. My brother stood near the doorway, holding the deed awkwardly, as if it was both proof and poison in his hands. My children were sitting on the edge of the couch, whispering to each other, unsure why the grown-ups were so tense. I wanted to explain it all to them, to make them understand, but how do you explain family drama in words that won't scare a 5-year-old? I hugged them tighter, feeling a surge of protectiveness I hadn't realized I could summon so fast. I took a slow breath and tried to think about my brother, the man he had become, not just the one I had grown up with. Time had changed him in ways I hadn't noticed until now. He had built a life full of rules and routines, always trying to keep control, always measuring people's worth by how much they followed his invisible standards. And yet, he still had that same stubborn streak I remembered from our childhood. That stubbornness had always protected him in a way, helped him survive challenges, but now it was turning into a wall that kept him from seeing the truth. I thought about my parents, about how they had set the stage for this conflict without ever meaning to. They loved both of us, I knew that, but their decisions were often unclear, leaving gaps that resentment could fill. My brother must have assumed the house was entirely his, that he alone had the right to decide who belonged inside. That assumption had never been challenged until now. And suddenly all the unspoken rules, all the years of quiet assumptions, were unraveling. I tried to find a way to explain myself. This isn't about taking anything from you, I said carefully, hoping the words would land. It's about fairness. It's about making sure everyone who belongs here, my kids, me, even you, knows where we all stand. He shook his head slowly, still holding the deed like it burned his hands. Fairness? He muttered. You think the world works like that? Life isn't fair. Family isn't fair. You just want to prove a point. I could see the anger and hurt mixing in his eyes, but beneath that, there was a flicker of something else, doubt. A hesitation that maybe, just maybe, the house wasn't solely his, that the story he had told himself for years might be incomplete. I didn't want to give him false hope, but I also wanted him to understand that this confrontation didn't have to destroy us. It could be a moment of clarity, of truth, if he was willing to face it. Just then there was a knock at the door. Both of us turned, startled, and I realized it was my sister-in-law. She had been visiting her parents nearby and had stopped by for what she thought would be a casual hello. She froze in the doorway, eyes widening as she took in the scene. My brother holding a paper, my children clinging to me, and the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. "What's going on?" she asked cautiously. Her voice was soft, but her presence changed the energy in the room. My brother's jaw tightened and I could see the conflict flicker again, anger, pride, and now embarrassment. I wasn't sure whether to feel relief that someone else was here or fear that this would escalate further with another witness. Before I could respond, my brother spoke. "It's nothing. Just family business." He tried to smile, but it was forced, brittle. I could see my sister-in-law wasn't convinced. She stepped inside slowly, glancing at the deed in his hands. "Is that?" she began, and I knew she was asking about the paper. I decided to take control of the situation. "It's the deed to the house," I said firmly, looking at her. "It shows that the house doesn't belong to just one person. It's been in the family for years and I've had legal ownership too. I didn't want to fight over it, but we can't pretend the truth isn't here anymore." Her eyes widened, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. She had always been someone who valued fairness and family, someone who could see both sides without getting lost in anger. I felt a small flicker of hope that maybe she could help calm the situation, or at least give my brother another perspective. My brother's reaction, however, was immediate and tense. "You shouldn't have brought her into this," he snapped. "This is between us. You and me. Don't drag others into it." His words were sharp, but beneath them I sensed the fear of losing control. The thought of others seeing cracks in his authority must have terrified him. I realized then that this wasn't just about the house or even the deed. It was about control, about legacy, about the narrative he had built in his mind for decades. And I had just pulled back the curtain. The more I tried to explain, the more I realized that we weren't just fighting over a piece of property, we were fighting over identity, memory, and the version of family he wanted to protect at all costs. I glanced at my children. They were whispering to each other, unsure what to make of the sudden adult tension around them. I knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from my daughter's face. "We're okay," I whispered, even though I wasn't entirely sure myself. I wanted to shield them from the fight, but I also knew that no matter how much I tried, they would feel the echoes of this conflict for years to come. My sister-in-law shifted her weight, finally speaking. Maybe we need to sit down and talk," she said gently, looking at both of us. "We've all loved this house. Maybe we can find a way to figure this out together." I looked at her, hope mixing with anxiety. Could she really be the bridge here? Or would her involvement just ignite my brother further? He didn't answer immediately. His eyes flicked between us, then back to the deed. I could see the storm raging inside him, the battle between pride, anger, and the faintest glimmer of reason. He paced a few steps, muttering under his breath, and then stopped abruptly. "I don't know if this changes anything," he said finally. "But we can talk. For now." The words were hesitant, fragile, but they were enough to hold the room in a fragile pause. I knew better than to assume the conflict was over. It wasn't. The tension was still there, simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the next spark. But for now there was a possibility, a small, tentative opening to navigate the storm without destroying everything in its path. I realized that this house, this family, and even this conflict, was bigger than any single argument or legal paper. It was about history, love, pride, and the struggle to balance them all. And as I watched my brother, my children, and my sister-in-law, I knew that the next steps would define not just the house, but the family itself. And I also knew this: nothing would be simple. Nothing would be easy. Every conversation, every glance, every decision from this point on could either heal or shatter what we had left. The storm was just beginning, and we were all standing in the middle of it, waiting to see which way it would break. If you want, I can continue the next 1,000 words to introduce more family members, hidden secrets about the house, and escalating emotional tension, keeping the suspense high for YouTube viewers so they can't stop watching until the next video. Do you want me to continue with that part? The air in the house felt thick, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. My brother stood by the window, looking out but seeing nothing, his hands gripping the frame as if it could anchor him against the storm I had just unleashed. My sister-in-law was trying to keep the mood calm, moving quietly around the room, offering gentle words that bounced off the tension like pebbles on stone. And my children, sensing the unease without understanding it, sat huddled together on the couch, whispering softly, their small hands intertwined. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. Every memory of this house, every shared moment of my childhood, every argument and every laugh came rushing back. It felt like the walls themselves were reminding me of everything that had led to this moment. And suddenly, the deed in my hand felt heavier than ever, not just a legal document, but a symbol of years of buried resentment, secrets, and unspoken truths. My brother finally turned to face me. His eyes were sharp, calculating, but underneath them I could see the cracks. The pride he clung to, the sense of absolute control he had always believed in, was starting to falter. "You think showing me this makes you the winner?" he asked, his voice low but edged with rage. "You think a piece of paper changes everything we've lived through?" I met his gaze steadily, refusing to flinch. "It doesn't make me the winner," I said. "It just tells the truth. And sometimes the truth is stronger than anger, stronger than pride, stronger than the fear of letting go." My words seemed to hover in the air, heavy with tension, and for a moment there was silence, so intense it felt like the room could crack from it. The sound of the doorbell broke the silence. Everyone froze. My brother's face hardened instantly, suspicion sharpening his features. I walked cautiously to the door and opened it, and my breath caught. There, standing on the porch, was my uncle, my father's younger brother, holding an envelope in his hand. His expression was serious, almost grim, and I immediately sensed that he had come with news that could tilt the balance in ways none of us were ready for. "I think it's time you all saw this," he said, handing the envelope to me. The moment my fingers touched it, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The weight of the unknown pressed down, heavier than the deed itself. I could see my brother tensing behind me, his eyes flicking to the envelope with a mix of fear and anticipation. My sister-in-law looked at me, eyes wide, sensing that the next revelation could change everything. I opened it slowly, the paper inside crisp and formal, the writing elegant but cold. As I read, my stomach dropped. It was a legal notice, one that suggested the house had additional claims I had never known about. There were mentions of distant relatives, disputes, and even a clause that could call into question parts of the deed. I glanced at my brother, who was now pacing, muttering under his breath. His face was pale, but his pride wouldn't let him show weakness completely. The tension skyrocketed. My children whispered to each other, sensing the chaos, and I hugged them closer, trying to shield them from the storm of emotions in the room. But I knew there was no hiding from this. The conflict had grown beyond just my brother and me. It was now entwined with family history, secrets long buried, and the very foundation of our legacy. My brother stopped pacing and glared at me. You brought this into the house?" His voice trembled, a dangerous mix of anger and disbelief. "Do you even understand what this means?" I nodded, holding the papers carefully, aware that any sudden move could ignite another wave of conflict. "I know exactly what it means," I said. "And I think it's time we face it together. All of us." He shook his head violently. "No. This isn't just about fairness anymore. This is about control. This is about who decides what's right in this family. And I won't let you take that from me." His hands trembled, and for a brief moment, I wondered if he would lash out, whether with words or something more. The intensity of his emotions was palpable, filling the room with an almost physical weight. The air seemed to crackle with anticipation. Every person in the room felt it, the unspoken threat that any word, any gesture could send everything spiraling. My sister-in-law tried again, her voice soft but firm. "Maybe we need to step back for a moment, calm down and think," she said. "If we let anger guide us, no one will get what's fair. Not your kids, not him, not you." He whirled on her, the tension snapping like a rubber band. "This isn't just about fairness," he yelled. "This is about the life we've lived, the sacrifices we've made. You don't get to just walk in and rewrite history." His chest heaved, and I realized that the battle wasn't really about a house or even the deed. It was about identity, pride, and the narrative he had built for himself over decades. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my own shaking hands. "I'm not rewriting history," I said. "I'm trying to make sure the future isn't built on lies or assumptions. My kids deserve that. We all deserve that." My words hung in the air, but instead of easing the tension, they seemed to make it sharper. My brother's face twisted, caught between fury and the faintest glimmer of realization. The children were now whispering, holding each other tightly. I realized that every moment we lingered in this charged atmosphere was leaving a mark on them, shaping their understanding of family, conflict, and trust. My heart ached, knowing that I couldn't shield them completely, but I also knew that facing these challenges head-on might teach them something valuable. Something about standing up for truth, even when it's hard. Suddenly, my uncle spoke again, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "There's more to this than just the deed," he said, looking at all of us. "Things were hidden. Decisions were made behind closed doors. And now those secrets are coming to light." He didn't elaborate, but the weight of his words filled the room with a new kind of suspense. Everyone turned toward him, realizing that the fight we had been having was only the surface of a much deeper conflict. My brother froze, eyes wide, as if hearing this confirmed some fear he had never admitted. I could feel my pulse quickening. The room was charged, every glance, every movement loaded with tension. It felt like the calm before a storm, the seconds before a hurricane hits, where everything you thought you understood could be swept away. And in that moment, I realized that nothing in this house, or in our family, would ever be the same. The secrets, the misunderstandings, the hidden claims, and the unresolved resentments were all converging. Everything we had built, everything we had assumed about who belonged where and who had the right to decide, was about to be challenged in ways none of us were ready for. I looked at my brother, whose face now reflected a mixture of fear, anger, and disbelief. I looked at my children, clinging to me, their small faces wide with anticipation. And I looked at my sister-in-law and uncle, who both seemed to understand that the next few moments could either destroy us or force us to confront truths we had avoided for too long. Could ignite the climax that had been building for months, maybe even years. And then, without warning, my brother slammed his fist onto the table. The sound echoed through the house, sharp and final, and I knew that the tipping point had arrived. Every heartbeat seemed to synchronize with the tension in the room. The air was electric, the stakes higher than ever, and the next move, any move, absolutely. Here's the next section, introducing a second plot twist, escalating the main conflict, and driving toward the climax while keeping the story human-centered, suspenseful, and SEO-friendly. The echo of my brother's fist on the table still lingered in the room when suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it at first, too focused on the storm in front of me, but then it buzzed again. Reluctantly, I pulled it out and my blood ran cold. A message from an unknown number flashed on the screen. "You don't know the whole story about the house. Check the files in your email. Hurry." My hands shook as I opened the email. My heart pounded in my chest. There were dozens of files, documents, and photographs, some labeled with dates I didn't recognize, some with signatures I had never seen before. I scrolled through and my stomach dropped. Hidden within the files were agreements and amendments that none of us had been told about, legal papers that suggested my brother's control over the house might be even less than I had thought. Before I could process it all, my brother lunged forward, eyes narrowing. "What are you doing? What's that on your phone?" he demanded, voice sharp with suspicion and panic. I froze, knowing that showing him even a glimpse could trigger another eruption of anger. "It's nothing," I said, tucking the phone into my pocket. But I couldn't ignore the reality. The email proved that the house's story was far more complicated than any of us had known. My uncle stepped forward, his expression grave. "Those files, they change everything," he said. "Your brother thinks he's in control, but the truth is there's another claim to this property, one that could overturn everything." I looked at him, my mind spinning. Another claim? Another twist? The tension in the room multiplied instantly. My brother's face paled, and I could see the anger giving way to fear. For the first time, his confidence faltered. Then my sister-in-law spoke up, her voice shaking slightly but firm. "Wait, are you saying that there's someone else who has legal rights to this house?" Her eyes darted between my brother and me. "Someone who could take it from all of you?" The words hung like a knife. My children instinctively huddled closer, sensing the fear without understanding the details. "Yes," my uncle confirmed. "It's complicated. There were agreements made years ago and someone you never suspected, might have a stronger claim than either of you." The weight of his words pressed down on us, and for a moment the room was suffocating. I realized that the conflict we had been fighting over for hours, or maybe even years, was just a fraction of the bigger storm. My brother's hands shook as he ran them through his hair. This can't be true," he muttered, pacing back and forth. "I've lived here my whole life. I've cared for this house. I've protected it. You're telling me it might all be meaningless?" His voice cracked slightly, and I could see the mixture of pride and fear wrestling inside him. I swallowed hard. I don't know if it's meaningless, I said carefully. But I do know this, we can't ignore it. We need to see the documents, understand the full story. Otherwise, none of us will know where we stand, not even you. My words seemed to hang in the air, but they didn't calm him. If anything, they added fuel to the fire. My uncle stepped closer, lowering his voice. There's more. The person with the potential claim, they've been watching this house, this family for years. They may not act immediately, but when they do, it will be sudden, and it could change everything. My stomach twisted. Watching us for years? I couldn't imagine who it could be. Was it another family member? Someone outside the family? Whoever it was, they had been silent, waiting, and now their presence, or potential presence, was like a shadow looming over us all. My brother turned to glare at me, his anger boiling over again. So now you're saying even the papers you brought here don't matter? That all of this, he gestured at the deed and the legal documents, isn't enough? I nodded slowly, meeting his gaze. I'm saying we don't know enough yet. There's a lot we've been kept in the dark about. And if we ignore it, we could lose everything, including each other. The room fell silent, the weight of the revelation pressing down harder than anything before. My children were trembling slightly, their whispers growing urgent. I hugged them tighter, feeling the fear and urgency reflected in their small faces. Every instinct in me screamed to protect them, to shield them from the chaos, but the reality was that we were all caught in it. There was no escaping. Then, unexpectedly, a loud bang came from the kitchen. Everyone jumped, hearts racing. My heart sank as I realized it was my brother's cat, knocking over a stack of papers, scattering them across the floor. But the timing, it felt like a warning, like a signal that the calm we had barely managed was fragile, temporary, and about to shatter completely. I bent down to gather the papers, my hands trembling, and I realized that the more I tried to control the situation, the more unpredictable it became. Every answer seemed to lead to another question, every revelation to another twist. The house wasn't just a home anymore, it was a maze of secrets, pride, and hidden truths, and we were trapped inside it together. My brother's eyes were fixed on me now, his jaw tight, his body tense. So what now? He demanded, his voice low but dangerous. What are we supposed to do with this, with all of it? I looked at him, feeling the pressure of the moment, knowing that one wrong move could ignite the explosion we had been inching toward for hours. I don't know yet, I admitted. But we have to be careful. There's more at stake than just the house. Our family, our children, everything we care about, it's all on the line. And the person behind this, they could make things a lot worse if we're not ready. The words sent a shiver down my spine, and I could see the same realization in my brother's eyes. Fear had replaced some of his anger, and uncertainty settled over the room like a heavy fog. And that's when I realized the true weight of the moment. The conflict we had been living through, the fights, the secrets, the anger, it was only the beginning. There was another player now, someone unseen, someone who could change everything in an instant. And we had no idea when, or how, they would strike. The tension was unbearable. My children were silent, sensing the danger, while my sister-in-law and uncle exchanged worried glances. The house felt smaller, every shadow longer, every creak louder. And in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. The climax was approaching, and nothing about this family, this house, or this fight would ever be the same again. If you want, I can continue the next 1,000 words moving into the full climax, with maximum emotional intensity, shocking revelations, and confrontations that leave the audience on the edge of their seats. Perfect for a suspenseful YouTube story series. Do you want me to continue to that climax? Absolutely. Here's the climax section, resolving the main conflicts while leaving room for one final twist to keep your audience hooked. The tension in the house had been building for hours, but in that moment, everything seemed to come to a head. My brother's face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he paced back and forth, while my children watched quietly, holding on to each other. My uncle and sister-in-law stood nearby, their expressions tense, waiting for what would happen next. And I felt a mixture of fear, determination, and exhaustion. I knew this confrontation could finally decide everything. I took a deep breath, clutching the deed and the documents from the mysterious email. We can't keep fighting like this, I said, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. The house doesn't belong to one person. It never has. But that doesn't mean it has to destroy us as a family. We need to face the truth together. My brother stopped mid-step, eyes narrowing. And what truth is that? He asked, his voice low but sharp. That someone out there could take it from us? That all my efforts, all my sacrifices mean nothing? His words cut through the air, but I knew the real truth wasn't about erasing his past, it was about acknowledging all of ours. I pulled the email documents forward, showing him the files. This isn't about who's right or wrong. It's about understanding that the house has always been more than any one person's control. There are claims we didn't know about and secrets we've kept from each other. But we can't ignore them anymore. We have to face them together. For a long moment my brother said nothing. His chest rose and fell rapidly, and I could see him fighting with himself, torn between pride, fear, and the faintest glimmer of understanding. My sister-in-law stepped closer, her voice gentle. You've protected this house all your life because you love it. But love doesn't mean controlling it alone. Maybe it's time to let the family decide together. He closed his eyes and let out a long, shaky breath. The anger in his eyes softened, replaced by exhaustion, and then, something I hadn't expected, he nodded. All right, he said quietly, almost to himself. We do this together. But we need to know the full story first. That small acknowledgement felt like a breakthrough. I could see the tension in the room beginning to shift, the heavy air easing just a little. The path forward wasn't clear yet, but at least there was a possibility for understanding, for fairness, for family. Then my uncle spoke, holding a small envelope that he had kept hidden until now. There's one last piece you need to see, he said. Everyone's eyes turned toward him, including my brother's, and the anticipation in the room was almost unbearable. He handed the envelope to me and I opened it slowly. Inside was a notarized document, one I had never known existed. It revealed that the original owner of the house had left the property in trust, with instructions that it was never to be owned by a single family member alone. The deed my brother had assumed gave him full control was only part of the story. The trust specified shared ownership, with the rights and responsibilities divided among all descendants. My brother's jaw dropped. So, it wasn't mine to begin with? He whispered, a mix of shock and disbelief in his voice. I shook my head. It wasn't meant for anyone to control alone. That's why the other claims exist. That's why the family always matters more than the papers themselves. He sank into the couch, running his hands through his hair. I didn't know. I thought I was protecting something that was mine. Everything I did. I thought it mattered. His voice broke, and in that moment I saw the boy I had grown up with, the one who had wanted love, recognition, and security. The anger and pride had been armor, and now it was finally falling away. I knelt beside him, my children still holding on to each other nearby. It mattered because you cared, I said softly. But what matters more is that we stay a family. That we don't let the house destroy what we have. There was a long pause and then quietly he nodded. The conflict that had felt impossible to resolve for so long had finally begun to find its end. We gathered together, reviewing all the documents, laying out every claim and every piece of evidence. For the first time in years, the focus shifted from anger to understanding. Just when the tension seemed to ease, my sister-in-law gasped softly. Wait. Look at this, she said, pointing to a signature on one of the older documents. Everyone leaned in and I felt my heart skip a beat. The signature wasn't from a relative we knew, it was from someone entirely unexpected. Someone who had influence, power, and the potential to overturn everything we had just settled. My uncle's face went pale. I can't believe it, he muttered. This changes everything again. Whoever this is, they could step in at any time. I looked at my brother, my children, and the rest of the family. The house felt heavier than ever, filled with history, secrets, and the weight of unseen eyes. Even though we had resolved the main conflicts between us, the story wasn't over. There was one more player in the shadows, someone we hadn't anticipated, and the threat of their arrival hung over us like a storm cloud. But for the first time I felt a small, fierce sense of hope. We had faced each other, faced the truth, and begun to rebuild trust. Whatever came next, we would face it as a family. And in that fragile, precarious moment, I realized that was worth more than any deed, any claim, or any house. The house was ours, not because of ownership but because of what we chose to make of it. And yet, deep down I knew the real storm had only just begun. If you want, I can write an epilogue or final part for your YouTube story, giving a subtle hint of the mysterious new claimant, leaving your audience in suspense for the next video while wrapping up the family's emotional arc. Do you want me to do that? The tension in the house slowly began to dissolve, like fog lifting after a storm. My brother sank into the couch, exhaustion etched across his face, and for the first time that day he seemed almost human again, not the rigid, angry figure I had faced earlier, but someone vulnerable, someone I could finally reach. My children were still holding each other, wide-eyed, but now there was curiosity replacing fear. They had witnessed a battle they didn't fully understand, yet they felt its weight. I knelt beside them, brushing their hair back and whispering that everything was going to be okay. We gathered around the table, laying out all the documents, deeds, and emails. My uncle and sister-in-law joined us, their presence grounding the room. For the first time, we were all looking at the same facts, the same history, the same truth. No assumptions, no pride, no anger, just reality. My brother's hands rested on the table, tense at first, but gradually relaxing as he absorbed everything. The house, it's never really belonged to one person, I said softly. It was always meant for the family, all of us, together. That's why the deed, the emails, even the older claims, they exist to remind us of that. Not to fight over, but to share. He didn't respond immediately. His eyes, glassy with unshed tears, met mine. I thought I had to fight for it alone, he admitted. I thought protecting it meant keeping everyone out. I didn't see what really mattered. His voice cracked, and in that moment all the anger, resentment, and pride melted into something raw and human. I reached over and put my hand on his. It wasn't about winning or losing, I said. It was about being honest, about respecting each other. That's what matters. Slowly the energy in the room shifted. The house, which had felt like a battleground all day, began to feel like home again. Memories surfaced, the laughter of our childhood, the holidays we had spent together, the birthdays celebrated in the living room. I could see my brother remembering too, the moments before control and pride had overshadowed everything else. For the first time we shared a quiet understanding. We spent hours going through the documents, discussing each clause, each claim, and each responsibility that came with the house. We agreed to create a plan together, a way to honor everyone's rights while protecting the legacy of the family home. Decisions were made collaboratively, and for the first time, I felt that fairness had been restored. My brother even smiled, small but genuine, and it was a smile I hadn't seen in years. My children were slowly drawn back into the space, asking questions about the papers, about the house, about why grown-ups sometimes argued. I answered as honestly as I could, keeping it simple and age-appropriate. Sometimes adults make mistakes, I said. Sometimes we forget what's most important. But what matters is fixing those mistakes and taking care of each other. That's what family really means. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the walls, my brother stood and walked toward the window. He looked out at the yard, the trees, and the familiar path we had all walked so many times as kids. I guess I never realized, he said quietly, that protecting the house isn't the same as protecting the family. I was wrong. I let pride blind me. I walked over and stood beside him. It's never too late, I said. We can start over. Together. My uncle nodded in agreement, and my sister-in-law placed a reassuring hand on my brother's shoulder. There was still a lot to process, a lot to rebuild, but for the first time, there was hope that the family could move forward. Even the mysterious email and the files we had discovered earlier had a purpose now. They reminded us that secrets, misunderstandings, and hidden truths can easily divide people, even those who love each other. But they also gave us the chance to face reality, to learn from it, and to strengthen the bonds that mattered most. We couldn't control the past, but we could shape the future, and that realization gave me a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. Later, as we gathered for a simple dinner in the kitchen, the house finally felt alive again. Not with tension, but with warmth. My children laughed softly as they recounted little adventures from earlier in the day, and my brother even joined in, teasing them gently. It was a small, ordinary moment, but in its ordinariness, it was extraordinary. It reminded us all that family is more than deeds, documents, or disputes. It's shared memories, love, and the choice to forgive and move forward. As the evening settled, I looked around the room, the familiar walls, the worn furniture, the pictures that lined the shelves, and I realized something important. The house itself wasn't what mattered most. It was the people inside it, the connections we had allowed to fray and were now beginning to repair. The real victory wasn't about legal ownership. It was about understanding, compassion, and trust. Even with the main conflicts resolved, there were lessons we all took to heart. My brother learned that control and pride could never replace family. I learned that patience, honesty, and courage could transform even the most intense disputes. My children learned that adults make mistakes, but love and communication can make things right. And together, as a family, we discovered that no document, no claim, and no misunderstanding should ever outweigh the bonds that truly matter. Just as we were beginning to relax, I received a quiet notification on my phone. I glanced at it, curiosity mixed with caution. It was a new message, Another email from the same unknown source, but this one was different. The subject line read, "There's more you need to know, before anyone else does." I froze for a moment, my mind racing. Was the story really over? Or had we only uncovered part of a much larger family secret? I looked at my brother, who had just been laughing with the kids, and saw the flicker of curiosity and caution cross his face too. We shared a knowing glance. Whatever came next, we would face it together as a family, just as we had learned to do today. The house, the documents, and the past had tested us, but we had survived, stronger and wiser for it. And so, the house was no longer just a building. It was a symbol, not of conflict or control, but of resilience, understanding, and family. We had faced anger, secrets, and hidden claims, and we had emerged on the other side with clarity and connection. The trust we rebuilt was fragile, yes, but real. The love we preserved was stronger than any document, any dispute, and any unseen threat. As night fell and the lights of the house glowed warmly, I held my children close and glanced around the room at my brother, uncle, and sister-in-law. There was peace, but also the quiet awareness that family, like life, is never truly without surprises. And that was okay. Because what mattered most was that we had chosen each other, and that choice would carry us through anything the future might hold. In that moment, I understood the most important lesson of all. Family is not defined by deeds, claims, or control. It is defined by love, forgiveness, and the willingness to face the truth together. The house had tested us, challenged us, and threatened to divide us. But in the end, it had reminded us what really matters. And though the mysterious emails hinted that more secrets might still linger, for now the house and our family was whole.